Winter holiday mascots take many forms, but they're usually ice types. This time we're going with another icon of seasonal cheer, Pokemon's very own Rudolph the Not-So-Red-Nosed Reindeer, Stantler. It's got a great design. Its antlers resemble eyes and are quite powerful, able to distort reality with illusions so convincing one is overwhelmed by a dizzying sensation of being dragged through them, unable to remain standing. Stantler's illusory powers were on full display in the anime, where it conjured convincing images of a stampeding Stantler horde in self-defense. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Stantler gained the evolution Wyrdeer, which was an incredibly useful ride Pokemon capable of dashing across harsh terrains. It also has cold-resistant fur, highly valued by the residents of Hisui, as well as antlers so powerful it's capable of distorting space. Today we're going to examine what type of Christmas Pokemon Stantler and Wyrdeer might be in the competitive scene. Were they a successful fan favorite a la the fun, reliable comfort of Home Alone? Or was their inadequacy the source of great psychological terror akin to Eyes Wide Shut? We shall find out, as today we ask, how good were Stantler and Wyrdeer actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. At first glance, Stantler was a pretty decent looking Pokemon. It was a normal type with good attack and speed that also had access to Earthquake, letting it smack the rocks, steels, and ghosts that would otherwise thwart its stab without resorting to hidden power. Additionally, it had somewhat of an unusual moveset for a normal type. It could threaten sleep with hypnosis, it had dual screens, and it could even punish the rest-laden GSC metagame with Nightmare. It wasn't anywhere near OU material based on this, especially since it was quite frail and it wasn't going to make much happen in UU either, as Dojo hit much harder, was faster, had 2 stabs, and was Spikes immune, so it was entirely outclassed. However, once Stantler reached NU, it hit its stride, becoming one of the best Pokemon in the tier. It was one of the faster Pokemon in the metagame, letting it throw around its powerful returns with ease. Who knows why it didn't get Double Edge though? Perhaps that would have been a bit much regardless. Return smacked much of the tier staples around nicely, even more so because the Pokemon switching into Stantler weren't the faster ones, so you'd have to withstand 2 returns from it, making the task even tougher. Resists were in short supply, and even the bulkier resists like Sudowoodo and Graveler got hit hard by Earthquake, whereas Magnemite and Ghastly were mercilessly obliterated. Earthquake was also huge for putting a super effective charge into Weezing, whose huge physical bulk would otherwise make it quite adept at withstanding return for a non-resist. Pretty much the only thing that could safely switch into Stantler was Shuckle, which was quite a decent Pokemon, but incredibly specific, for its passivity could be exploited, and even Shuckle could get greatly annoyed by Stantler's bag of tricks. For instance, Stantler excelled at stealing leftovers with Thief, making it even more difficult for opponents to withstand its hits, or putting a check to sleep with Hypnosis. Hypnosis also made Stantler a strong lead, able to utilize that high speed stat to jumpstart momentum for its team right from turn 1. These 2 moves together often made for the best pairing, but Stantler could also slot in Light Screen and or Reflect, which helped Stantler itself be more threatening. No longer did Stantler's greatest enemy, Xatu, so severely endanger it with its psychics against Stantler's usually exploitable low special defense, resulting in a Stantler switch out. Nor would a Desperation Explosion from Weezing, Pineco, or the Rock types. Of course, the moves were also superb team support for other offensive threats on Stantler's team, such as Light Screen helping enable the terrifying Swords Dance Kingler. While this was Stantler's go-to variant, it could also reinforce its longevity in the face of otherwise debilitating status with a Rest Talk set. No longer afraid of the likes of Thunderwave Wigglytuff and able to repeatedly blast away at the opponent. Stantler didn't love dealing with Xatu, which was a big deal since Xatu was the best Pokemon in the tier, but if one had a concrete plan for dealing with the Psychic Bird, which one needed to succeed in the tier anyway, so not exactly an unusual inconvenience, then Stantler would be enabled to mow through the rest of the tier, especially with Spike supports pushing narrow damage thresholds over the edge and helping pressure and create opportunities against even its few checks like Shuckle. So all in all, Stantler had a strong debut generation as one of the best overall Pokemon in the NU metagame. Generation 3 brought many valuable additions for Stantler. Most immediate is its new ability, Intimidate, which is one of the best in the game and often creates niches of some sort, even for Pokemon that otherwise aren't that good, weakening physical attacks is simply that valuable. Additionally, Stantler also loved the addition of Choice Band, now able to put even more of an immediate charge into its physical attacks, especially since it now wielded Double Edge for stab, and theoretically, Intimidate's physical attack weakening would provide more opportunities for it to overcome its poor defensive stature and hit the field to start slamming the opposition. Oh, that wasn't all either. Stantler also received Calm Mind and Thunderbolt. Perhaps this might allow for some sort of late game sweep with Stantler's poor special defense patched up and the possibility of using Hypnosis to obtain more Calm Minds or shut down a check. Special sweeping Stantler seems strange, but at this point you realize it actually has a pretty good special attack stat, so why not? Stantler even received another move quite rare for normal types, Thunder Wave. Surely there'd be some sort of niche for it in Gen 3. All of that would have been true had Stantler possessed the fortune to drop to a tier where it wasn't completely enveloped by power creep to the point of being invisible. For some reason it remained in Yu, despite being hilariously outclassed by the tier's peerless matriarch Kangaskhan and not being too great in its own right, given how comparatively strong and bulky the rest of the tier was. Intimidate wasn't nearly enough of a distinguishing factor. In NU, Stantler undoubtedly would have excelled, maybe even too much. Sadly, it was not given that opportunity because the spirit of Christmas was too strong in Yu, or something like that. Who's to say? All we know is Rudolph got robbed in this generation, as it was never ever used in Yu, yet wasn't given the opportunity to return to NU. Stantler did return to NU in Generation 4, and just when power creep had gotten so brutal that it was now outclassed by another normal type, which was much stronger and faster. Tauros, a Pokemon which even packed Intimidate, really rubbed salt in the already gruesome wound. Stantler did have some cool advantages over Tauros though. It had incredibly strong priority in Sucker Punch, it had an excellent coverage move in Megahorn, and it could even whip out Gravity. This was not just useful for enabling strategies revolving around Spikes and Earthquake, but for increasing the otherwise risky accuracy of Stantler's Hypnosis. There were many problems with this though. As great as Sucker Punch and Megahorn were, they weren't nearly enough to compensate for how Tauros hit so much harder and naturally outsped so much, such as Tier King Charizard, which Stantler couldn't hope to reach. Gravity Hypnosis wasn't enough either, and if you really wanted Hypnosis on a normal type, Persian was your Pokemon of choice, packing a speed stat even higher than Tauros's, as well as useful safe priority in Fake Out and even being able to provide switch for teammates through U-turn. Stantler was definitely a fun choice if you were into gimmicky gravity teams, but those teams were gimmicky and not actually used seriously for a reason, which was their incredible inconsistency and lack of a reliability. Stantler itself wasn't exactly a dab hand or a hoof at pulling off the Gravity Hypnosis combo either. You needed to Gravity first, not shutting down something initially with Hypnosis, as Stantler would have liked to have done as per previous generations. So Stantler needed to grab that Gravity on the switch, lest its awful defenses get blasted with greater ease than ever in such a power crept generation. But what was it threatening out, given how its attack stat was less impressive than ever before? The answer was to not think about it too much, because if you were using Stantler, you weren't playing with the goal of winning above all else anyway. So you may as well just have fun and see what happens. Yeah, that was unfortunately the Stantler experience in Gen 4. And unsurprising spoiler alert in Gens 5 and beyond too, because in a shocking twist, Game Freak chose to allow their creation to suffer and toil in unviable obscurity. Oh wow, Gen 5 brought the dream world, rejuvenating Pokemon with new abilities. What did this mean for Stantler? Sap Sipper. Don't get us wrong, Sap Sipper is a great ability. A grass immunity and an attack boost for being hit by a grass move is superb. Talk about punishing Leech Seed or Spore. However, there's a reason Stantler wasn't used to punish Ferrothorn or Ferroseed or Breloom or Amoonguss or Tangrowth or any grass type with +1 attack should they dare to use their best move. Because it had so many flaws, it needed a lot more than this ability to become viable. In most cases, any ability change short of Wonder Guard would have also required supplementation in a form of a move pool boost. Stantler's move pool, while not bad in and of itself, was seriously lacking in terms of strong, forceful options given what Stantler itself actually was. It got fighting coverage in Jump Kick. Yeah, cool. But like Sap Sipper, not nearly enough. Make it close combat and then we'll talk. But even then, Stantler would have also appreciated Swords Dance and or a base attack buff and or an ability like say adaptability to do anything with it. As such, when Stantler hit NU, it was no surprise whatsoever that nobody ever thought about it, as it was now outclassed by both Kangaskhan and Tauros at the same time, leaving it untiered, also known as actively not being recommended for use in any competitive tier. Yeah, riveting. Stantler's story in Gen 6 might sound familiar. Bad Pokemon doesn't get a Mega, Charizard and Mewtwo get 2. The bad Pokemon is so bad even the newfound existence of PU doesn't save it, for power creep has reached the point where it is rendered unable to compete even there. Is it a cliche? Well, yes, but the whole reason it's a cliche is because of how common it is. Stantler's is the tale of so many other Pokemon, that overlooked, discarded majority. Plus, beyond that, don't you want a Mega Stantler which fully embraces the spirit of Christmas? That kind of holiday cheer would do everyone some good. Make it an ice type, give it antlers made out of icicles, get crazy with it, something. But no, instead Stantler was left to deal with the banality of its own unviability as it languished in the limbo of untiered. The only thing that changed for Stantler in Generation 7 was that it was unable to find a spot in PU for the reason that it was now outclassed by more normal types than ever before. And that's as if it would have been able to find a niche even if every other normal type disappeared. Its base stats were just so dismal even by PU standards, and it's not like it had any unique, sufficiently viable attributes to make up for it. It's at this point that it became abundantly clear that Stantler was suffering from something we might call the Mighty Yena effect. Why does it not have an evolution? The fact it was so unable to find any sort of viability whatsoever in a tier so commonly populated by not fully evolved Pokemon was genuinely worrying. Meanwhile, the likes of Dodrio received Swords Dance. Yeah, because that makes total sense design-wise. Oh, and Dodrio got a massive speed buff while they were at it. Griping about it isn't much fun, but neither is the situation Game Freak bestowed upon Stantler, leaving it untiered again. Stantler took Generation 8 off and disappeared to Pokemon Legends Arceus, where it discovered an evolution, finally, so that when it returned in Generation 9, it being terrible was no longer its problem. It wasn't a fully evolved Pokemon. Now, Eviolite Stantler not taking off surprised absolutely nobody, but no matter, for there was hope for the newcomer Wyrdeer. It actually lost 20 base speed, which was significant, but if that was the cost for how it gets a major improvement in every other field, it was worth it. It gained half Psychic typing, finally, some resistances, and a good stab type. Its bulk was much improved too. Its defenses were only a bit higher, but its HP made an enormous leap, all the way to the superb base 103. Its offenses were also finally fit for the modern scene, coming in at a base 105 on both sides. The possibilities were plenty, especially in Gen 9. Wyrdeer's Girafarig-esque normal Psychic typing did bring it the benefit of making it a Psychic immune to Ghost, but at the cost of being a Psychic that didn't resist fighting. But this was with the generation with terrestrialization, of course, which also offered it the possibility of overcoming its weaknesses by becoming whichever type it needed in order to do its job. Sure, it was specific and restricted if it needed to Terra to really be effective, but it'd be worthwhile if it were just that good once it did Terra. Wyrdeer dropped to PU, perhaps a bit surprising at first given how solid its new stats were, but given how min-max Gen 9's power creep was, even without Terra taken into account, it makes perfect sense. There, however, Wyrdeer was finally able to bring the Stantler line some success in the tier. Its go-to set was the Double Dancer, packing both agility and calm mind in order to unleash super boosted stab stored powers. It was downright terrifying as a sweeper, blasting even through resist with enough boost, and it was quick to accumulate a sufficient amount as stored power got stronger for each stage any stat was boosted, and both agility and calm mind were providing 2 boosts per turn, whether +2 to speed or +1 to special attack and special defense. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, Wyrdeer would often hold a Grassy Seed, which boosted its defense in grassy terrain. One would pair it with Thwacky, and it'd be off to the races. Not only did Grassy Seed make its stored power even stronger, but it also, in conjunction with Intimidate and Wyrdeer's great bulk, provided easy initial setup opportunity against physical attacks and meant that Wyrdeer would have boosted bulk on both sides, making it nigh unbreakable once it got going, and thus able to repeatedly boost until its stored power would crush everything. You wouldn't exactly be able to stuff it with a dark type immune to stored power either, as Wyrdeer's last move was a calm mind boosting Dazzling Gleam, and it even loved to terrestrialize into a fairy type, completely turning the table on dark types and gaining that wonderful fighting resistance. Wyrdeer could spin out of control incredibly quickly. Thwacky would find a switch in, use U-turn, and that be it. The strategy was so potent, it even saw some usage in NU, though not not quite as successfully thanks to the tier's higher power level, but still, this was the greatest success the Stantler line had had in literally 2 decades, so that was just fine. Of course, just like December 26 follows Christmas, Wyrdeer's time had just come to an end. Though it's thematically fitting, we still don't like the fact that the DLC came around, brought huge power creep with it, and completely wiped out any semblance of viability Wyrdeer had even in PU. At the time of this video, Wyrdeer is untiered, and with another DLC coming, it's unlikely it's going to change within Generation 9, barring some serious changes and buffs, which for the record, we would utterly love to see. Nothing would make us happier than Wyrdeer's unviability being an outdated thing of the past. And that's it. So how good were Stantler and Wyrdeer actually? Well, Stantler started off as an elite Pokemon in its debut generation of NU, but ever since, it's been one of the worst Pokemon around, eternally outclassed. Well, it wasn't really its fault in Generation 3. It was an NU Pokemon at heart, yet was stuck in UU for some reason. But ever since then, it's just been hopefully outdone by seemingly every normal type under the sun, not thrown so much as a snowball of a buff by Game Freak. It finally received an evolution in the form of Wyrdeer, which was a superb PU Pokemon in early Generation 9. It even saw some use and success in NU. But then the DLC came, and that was that. All in all, Stantler and even now Wyrdeer have had it really rough in the competitive scene, wandering haplessly through the generations much like a perturbed Tom Cruise patrolling the softly lit wintertime streets of Manhattan. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Stantler or Wyrdeer? How would you buff it because they really need it? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.